Dakshinamurti is silent, eternally silent. Sri Bhagavan has been identified with Dakshinamurti, especially by those who sought his instruction. He is silent, with an eternal silence. What is the nature of that silence? It is unutterable by any word and inconceivable by any thought. But its nature is realized by those who know themselves. Knowing themselves, they abide in a state of absolute silence. It is the absolute, formless, unborn, immutable, undecaying, imperishable reality. To realize that for yourself, inquire within yourself to know who you are. As long as you regard the absolute, the reality, God, your own true self as this, it remains unknown. When the objectivizing outlook is abandoned, it is known, for then you no longer mistake the unreal for the real and the real for the unreal. Rather, by such inquiry, in such knowledge, you know the real as it ever is, and you know the unreal has never come to be. If you do not know the reality of your own self, then you imagine yourself as if limited or bound, even though you yourself are the unlimited, and you yourself are the very quintessence or nature of liberation. If you do not know your own nature, if you do not know the bliss of your own self, there appears attachment. If you do not know your own consciousness, your own being, there appears misidentification. Know the source of happiness and realize it as your own true being, and there is no attachment. Then there is never anything wrong. And that great silent perfection is self-evident. If you cease to misidentify, that is, you abandon imagined false definitions regarding your own nature, then there is no bondage, no limitation, nothing wrong at any time in life or death. Even if you simply give up the single misidentification with the body and thereby transcend the false belief in an existent world, is there ever anything wrong? The Maharshi has declared that silence is the state in which no I rises. That means that the very seed of ignorance, the starting point of all misidentification, the I notion, the belief or assumption of existing as an individual entity, does not rise. That is, is not imagined. That is the perfect fullness. That is your true state. A state that's not waking, not dreaming, not even sleeping. That is your true being, not a body, not a mind, not some ego notion or belief in a separated individuality. That same Dakshinamurti with whom the Maharshi is identified is referred to, even by Shankara and others, as Adi Guru, the first or original or primordial Guru. That is the source of spiritual instruction. What is that source? Can that source be found in duality? If so, how would non-dual truth emanate from it? If it is not in duality, then it cannot be external to you. It cannot be something gross or subtle. That source is identical to that in you by which the truth is known. And truth alone knows itself. Brahman alone knows Brahman. The self alone knows the self. No other can do so because of the transcendent nature of the self and its utter non-duality, and because nothing else has ever come to be. How could something which has never come to be know that which always is? And how can that which always is not know or be itself? Question within yourself, who am I? And discern your real nature, your actual existence. How could your existence ever be other than what it is? Just know yourself as you are. And everything is all right. As you inquire within yourself to know yourself, if you have a question, feel free to ask. If you want to relate your own experience, please feel free to speak.
Listening to your discourse and reflecting upon my meditations, I can see clearly that when I am inward or inquiring into myself, busy inquiring into myself, I'm not objectifying in any way. I'm not attaching myself to situations or the behavior of others. I'm inwardly focused and delighting in myself. And in my meditation, then I have to retrace my steps or remove my attachment or my mistaken perspective in order to regain the jewel that was always hanging there on my head. And there's, the grace of the Maharshi is just like, it's supporting the whole gamut of my meditation. And to, like this morning I had the experience of casting my burden upon Him, the Lord of the universe, and it felt like, that feels like the right thing to do. Because my concerns, or trying, in my meditation, trying to see how am I going to manage this situation, or what's the best approach. Or, I was still in the picture. I was still an actor, one of the actors. Instead of like, seeing that there wasn't even a stage. Get off the stage.
Casting off one's burden signifies the elimination of the attachment and the misidentification. If you're truly disidentified and detached, you can even be thinking or planning about that very thing, yet there'll be no bondage and no suffering. The only suffering is when we feel bound, and the only bondage is when we have become confused regarding our own nature. Now, if you've really cast the burden, you can't take it back. That'd be stealing. Not good to steal from God. You'll recall the Maharshi's analogy of feeling the weight or burden of such attachments, such false definition, and all its various manifestations in life. As his analogy is that it is equivalent to one of the carved figures on a tower of a temple, holding up, carved so it looks like it's holding up the whole temple tower. Maybe you saw it maybe at Adi Annamalai Temple. You can see it very quite clearly there. The figure's made to look as if it's holding up the whole tower, but really it's just a bas-relief carving. And the foundation is what's holding the whole thing up. He said that, but it's farcical, almost, that the figure is thought to be holding it up. Likewise it's farcical when you feel that you as an ego entity are in charge of all this. Emphasis should be placed on actually gaining that freedom from misidentification. We should not take a shallow interpretation of such surrender as meaning you just don't think about it, or a momentary emotional calm or relief from something, even if that momentariness would last for days or weeks. What is indicated is an utter dissolution of egoity, and no confusion about the origin of or source of happiness. No misidentification with the body, and consequently no false notion of being a performer of action or a doer, even when your body is engaged in the activity.
That's a lot of meditation right there, to remove one's sense of doership, remove one's sense of body identification, to stay in tune with the source of happiness. And I know it's possible. What really helps me is I take 100% responsibility, but then sometimes that responsibility is objectified, rather than the clear responsibility is to remain inward, to remain disidentified, or to continue my
If you take care of that for which you are spiritually responsible, which is self-realization, all other responsibilities are already included in that. And then whatever those responsibilities are, they feel light as a feather.
As I meditate on the source of the teaching, it starts out kind of with the assumption that it's somewhere separate, and to move towards it or to find it. And as I meditate on it, it changes from like a concept, like a collection of knowledge or our teaching, until it just becomes, I'm not separate from it. And it has less shape or form or
Go the other direction. Do not be concerned with this, be concerned with I. What you're describing is good, but what I'm describing is foolproof. Whether the source of the teaching appears to be the same as you, differentiated from you, or both, set aside that idea, whatever the idea is, and first find out your nature and see if you are a distinct entity. After all, what actually is the teaching or the truth of non-duality? When we speak of a teaching of self-knowledge, what actually is the teaching? It cannot be the words that one associates with it or that are used for purposes of communication. It must be something deeper.
as I inquire into my own nature, there's something that is there that's an object that at the moment doesn't seem to go away.
What do you mean by there?
there seems to be someplace where I'm not.
How do you know about it?
Well, because I'm here. So there must be a there.
What is it that knows about here and there?
Well, somebody who's neither of those places, but both of those places.
All right. So do the concepts of here and there have any existence apart from the one who knows them?
No, they're in there. They're only.
If the one who knows them is identified with the body, here and there are physical space. If he's identified with the mind, here and there are represent mental distances, so to speak, mental differentiation, or even time. Are you the body? Are you the mind?
Well, if I look at what I think is the body and what is the mind, I was going to say I'm not quite sure what those things are, but I actually know. I know what they are.
You may know what they are, you may be in doubt about what they are, but one thing you're sure of, you're sure that you are. The fact of your existence is undeniable. It is not possible for you to experience otherwise. Even if you conceive otherwise, you still exist. To know that conception. Does the body or the mind exist apart from you? Do here and there exist apart from you? If they do not, do they exist at all?
Well, if I look into the concept of the body or the mind and try to find what's actually there, the only thing I can find is that's actually there is just existence. It's not. It doesn't actually change into a body. It doesn't get mixed up with it unless I start saying that that's who I am. Then there's an apparent.
But does the existence itself change?
No.
What changes cannot be real. What truly is, always is, just as it is.
Or I want to say, how do I forget that?
Remembrance and forgetting are considered conditions of the mind. Do you ever actually forget your existence? Are there two of you, one to forget or remember the other?
No, my existence never kind of gets outside of itself and forgets itself and then comes back and remembers itself.
Is it divisible within itself?
No, because it's you can't divide something up that doesn't have anything to do, doesn't have any form. You can't. where would I don't know where I would go to not exist or to get it into pieces or something.
So the different kinds of differences aren't true for your existence. Differences of the same kind, differences of different kinds. Homogeneous but divided within itself. Such are not true of your existence. If that existence steadily abides in the knowledge of itself, you yourself are the source of the teaching. The teaching, the source, and the one who knows it are all the same. Now, can you see it is better to even have the idea that the source of the teaching would be some great thing, even outside of yourself, but abandon the ego notion, than to retain the ego notion, but somehow think the source was inside you. Because that inside would still only be within an ego context. It wouldn't really be within.
No. That would be like within a mistake.
Right. Yeah. Clear?
It's clear, but there's like just little thoughts want to start rising up.
Who knows them?
I know them, for sure, and they're mine.
Then inquire, who are you? When thoughts appear to rise, do they rise outside of you or within you?
Well, I tried, at first it was like they rise outside, but no, they're inside. But then it's kind of like, they're not, no, they're still outside.
Outside is another idea inside. Okay.
Yeah.
How many thoughts have arisen in this lifetime alone?
A lot.
In this waking state alone. You can count the dreaming state at the time. When you're dreaming, we'll count that.
We have yet to have a dialogue in the dreaming state. So.
Has the consciousness which knows the thoughts been depleted, even in the least degree, by the rise and destruction of all those thoughts? Has the nature of that consciousness changed at all?
No, it's not affected by it at all.
Do any of those thoughts actually define the consciousness?
No, they really don't.
What does not define does not confine. Abide steadily in the knowledge that your nature is the consciousness alone. And then tell me if there's such a thing called thought. Yes, Shanti.
So since nothing can be known except by the presence of consciousness, then this is the very key to the total picture here. In other words, the clear abidance as consciousness, ever present, ever changeless, uncreated and undying, is the clear solution to what seems to be still going on, but if it's very clear and if it's predominating, that it is all due to consciousness, and that is the real nature, always. That would lift everything from wherever it seems to be into the realm of consciousness. As the truth, the unchanging and uncreated truth.
If it is unchanging and uncreated, even all is no longer all. All is no longer all.
Right. Yes, of course. In talking, we're using words.
But just oneself alone
Yes.
remains.
Indeed.
That is peace.
Yes.
That's Shanti.
Actually, during Jim's conversation, I kind of had the same feeling, because I was thinking, and during your discourse, I was kind of looking and saying, okay, well, what veils that reality for myself? But then during this conversation that you had with Jim, where you kept stressing, has that existence ever gone away? Has it ever diminished? And so I started looking and saying, oh, that's interesting, because when I objectify something, actually that reality has never diminished. In fact, even the objectification itself, and this is similar to what I guess Shanti was saying, is that really is just myself. It's just sort of objectified it somehow. But really the energy and power is...
Yes. Even the apparent existence and the power behind the illusion is only the reality. But really, illusion means that which is not.
Yeah.
To explain how such superimposition of the unreal on the real occurs, how such misidentification occurs, we loosely speak of having an objective outlook, seeing yourself as an object when you're obviously non-objective in nature. But that's just said by way of instruction. Have you ever become an object? It's not like I've become a rock or this cushion. Mm-hmm. Or a body.
Or a body. A rotting body.
A rotting body.
But I guess the reason I mentioned that is because if I think I'm this object, or this has some reality to it, and I notice, okay, where does the reality come from? Does it ever come from that object? And that's it, the life, everything. It's only, the circumference of the object itself, the cushion. contains that existence. But it doesn't. So that whole theory becomes kind of, I guess when I was looking at it that way, that the reality comes from myself, then it kind of expands that experience.
If the sense of reality comes from yourself, the objects keep changing and are subject to rising up and being destroyed. That tells you about reality itself and its unchanging nature and its non-objective nature.
Yeah. You mean that is the substratum?
Mm-hmm. And by object is meant everything from the notion I to the states of mind such as waking and dreaming and deep sleep to all their content, which is everything experienced in the various modes of mind, the body, the senses, and what have you. When you dream, do you become any of the dream content?
Yeah.
Does the dream content exist apart from you?
Yeah.
But has the dream ever come to be, actually?
Yeah. Has a dream come to be? In other words, has it come to be as something existing by itself on its own?
Even a dependent existence.
Okay, dependent on the reality.
On the substrate. What was mentioned before is such things have no independent reality. What does not have an independent reality, but depends entirely on something else, is only that something else misperceived. The substrate misperceived is all this. I, not known, appears as it. And between the dual poles of I and this is spread all delusion. This depends on I, so know who am I. How could there be a veil between yourself and yourself? But if you regard yourself as something this,
Right.
then you pretend as if there were two.
So it seems like
If there's a rope and it appears as a snake, does the snake have a dependent existence?
obviously, yeah, it can't.
It doesn't have any existence at all, does it?
No.
We can say the snake is nothing but the rope, but that means the rope alone is. We can say all this is Brahman, but that means Brahman alone is. You can say all this experience is really myself, but in truth, just the self, which is unchanging, alone is. What's this talk of experience?
Yeah, that I see that because, for instance, you know, we went out to dinner last night. We haven't gone out to dinner in a long time. You know, we went to a new restaurant and they had all sorts of different types of things. So it was kind of a new experience. But meditating on it just now, I was kind of noticing, oh, okay. It seemed like once the reality, or the essence, the substratum, was really the whole time that existence, the existence of those objects decreased. And that, you know, in other words, kind of, you know, before it seemed to be more objective. There's food, there's different types of food.
And after you consume them, they seemed less objective?
No, it seems like there's
They became part of you. until much later, in which case they were no longer part of you.
But as soon as it occurred, I guess the point was is that as soon as it kind of sank in, that actually the whole thing that was really going on was really just this substratum. It wasn't, like, some object, the food coming. I mean, it may have had an appearance of food.
Just as you seem to have an appearance of a body.
Yeah. Yeah, just like that. And the body takes the food and drops it down the hatch.
Mm-hmm. You probably did the same thing in last night's dream when you got hungry.
Yeah. It was a lot of dream food.
Dream bodies eat dream food. It's just a matter of which dream you appear to be in.
What do you mean?
Whether a dreaming dream or a waking dream. They both have the same false appearance of a subject and an object, and a form that the subject appears to be in, and an object apart from himself. Within each, there are subtle thoughts, gross perceptions, objects including food, bodies, what have you.
Yeah, but there's the assumptions.
And whichever one you're in, whichever dream you're in, you're always prepared from that position to deny the reality of the other dreams.
Okay, so because that substratum is not recognized, what goes through all those states?
That which is the substrate is actually all-pervading, all-encompassing, but utterly transcendent. What has happened to last night's dream food and dream restaurant? We can say they've gone away, but they never actually came to be. It is similar in this state.
Yeah, because it seems like once that substratum is noticed, then it becomes really not important, I guess.
What is important is to identify with that substrate. To know that what is referred to as the substrate is you, and you are not what is appearing while awake, while dreaming, nor even in deep dreamless sleep.
Okay, that's clear. Okay, so it's a matter of being one-pointed, I guess.
What do you mean?
To finish, to be one-pointed on who I am. Not to stop short on, a meditation.
The best meditation, true meditation, is when the meditation is one-pointedly upon the nature of the meditator.
based on what you're saying today, yesterday I was listening to someone singing, and it brought tears to my eyes in the beauty of the voice and how it impacted me. Yes, it was this dream person singing this dream song, but it definitely was an experience of bliss. So what I'm hearing you saying is really then trace that back to the real beauty, which is the self. Is that what you're saying?
Whether we speak of it as beauty, bliss, truth, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram, the truth, the good, and the beautiful, all these have only one source. That source is entirely real.
Is the real beauty.
When we know the source and know ourselves as that, we abide as that, knowing ourselves as inseparable from it. It is from this vantage point that we can speak of dismissing everything else as unreal.
मैत्याद्रिभिर्गुणैर्युक्तं भवत्युत्तमवासनं भूयो जन्मविनिर्मुक्तं जीवन्मुक्तस्य तन्मनः.
With friendliness and other qualities conjoined, that mind of the Jivamukta is endowed with the best tendency, vasana, and is liberated from birth and becoming.
Saruposo mano nasho jivanmuktasya vidyate nidagarupanashastu vartate deha muktike.
That destruction of the mind of the Jivanmukta is existing with form. Nadaga, the formless destruction, is abiding in bodiless liberation.
Videha mukta evasau vidyate nishkalatmakaha samagragra gunadharam api sattvam praliyate.
The disembodied liberated one is indeed that which exists as the partless self, and even the possession of the entire foremost good qualities, sattva, is dissolved.
Videha mukto vimale pade parama pavane videha mukti vishaye tasmin sattva-kshayatmake.
In the blemishless state of disembodied liberation, the supremely holy Videhamukta, in that sphere is the abode of the being of the self. Or, in that sphere is that which is of the nature of the destruction even of sattva.
चित्तनाशे विरूपाख्ये न किञ्चिद्दिह विद्यते न गुणा न गुणास्तत्र न श्रीर्ना श्रीर्न लोकता.
The destruction of the mind named Virupa, of a different form. In this case, nothing is existing here. There is no attribute and no attributelessness there. No light, prosperity, good fortune, splendor, beauty, and no non-light, no non-prosperity, bad fortune, absence of splendor, ugliness, and no thing of the world.
Na chodayo nastamayo na harsha marsha samvidaha na tejo na tamak kinjit na sandhyadi na ratrayaha na satta na picha satta na cha madhyam hi tatpadam.
No rising and no disturbance, or no non-disturbance, no perception, knowledge, feeling of joy, pleasure and anger, impatience, indignation, no light, no darkness, nothing whatsoever of twilight and such, no night, no existence, and not even non-existence, and no middle is there certainly in that state, or no middle state certainly is that.
ये हि पारं गता बुद्धे संसाराडम्बरस्य च तेषां तदास्पदं स्फारं पवनानामिवाम्बरम्.
Certainly those who have gone beyond the intellect and the great noise of samsara, then of those there is the expanse of that abode as the sky in which the wind blows.
Samshanta dukkhamajdatmakam suptam anandamandharamapetharajastamo yat akashakoshtanavo tanavo mahanta tasmin pade galita chittavalava bhavanti.
That in which suffering is completely brought to peace, which is the self that is not inert, the one that is in deep sleep, the treasure of bliss, which is devoid of rajas, agitation, and tamas, inertia, in which the sheaths are like space, as one who passes on. In that state are the great ones, with even the particles of the mind dropped.
हे निदाघ महाप्राज्ञ निर्वासनमना भव बलाचेतः समाधाय निर्विकल्पमना भव.
O Nadaga, who possesses great knowledge, be with a mind without tendencies. Be with a vigorous mind for the accomplishment of the Nirvikalpa mind.
Yajjagadbhasakam bhanam nityam bhati swataspurat sayeva jagatas sakshi sarvatma vimalakritihi.
The eternal light which illuminates the universe shines, shining by its own self. It alone is the witness of the universe, the self of all, and of blemishless activity.